that knowing is so important. Having a space where you can
Powerful.
explore your own experience and find other people who've got similar experiences. This is how they dealt with it. This is what they learned. This is what helped for them. Without fixing each other, don't give advice. Just share. This is what I did. And this is what I learned. Like we're doing here. That connection that you feel, that kind of, oh, maybe I'm okay or okay enough because other people are experiencing this, therefore it's okay.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Let's Heal with Beth Jones. That's me, your host. I am your healing mentor. And I have with us today a wonderful guest, gentleman by the name of Brian Henderson. Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Lovely to be here.
I'm happy to have you. And would you be so kind as to introduce yourself?
Sure, yes. So I'm Brian Henderson. I am living in Hong Kong. Been here 13 years now, and have been on a healing journey the last 5 years or so. I was working in a very high-powered job as a C-suite, and lots of different things happened in personal life and in business life. And I just ended up with depression and anxiety and chronic insomnia, upset tummy, and basically was just really burned out. So I've been recovering from that. It's been a couple of years at least recovering from that. And then I realized actually there's other stuff that I have to heal from that goes back like a lot further back in time than just that immediate crisis. That's a little bit about me.
Yeah. In fact, we met not too long after your healing journey began, which coincided with around the time that mine began. So I was also in Hong Kong almost 5 years ago that mine began. As I recall, you were just a few months ahead of me in that process. And I think I might have been like in some of the worst parts of mine, but you were already finding your way into a better place, a happier place, more joyful place, and doing some interesting things with that as well, which we'll come around and talk about that in just a little bit. But it was interesting to me to find someone in Hong Kong who was going through essentially at a high level the same thing that I was going through. And our professional careers were not that dissimilar either. So you being a lawyer, and I was doing forensic accounting work with lawyers. And in fact, I know a number of people with your firm, your former firm globally. So it was an interesting connection that we had. So I remember we had tea at one of the very nice hotels in Hong Kong the first time we met.
We did, yeah, so it was lovely. I mean, it was so interesting how similar our stories were. And yeah, actually also different. I guess maybe our healing journeys have also been different. It's what happens when you reach out about these things. You find there are actually a lot of other people out there experiencing something similar. I mean, you made it sound like a race. It's really not a race to heal, but it takes the
Not a
time
race.
that it
Well,
takes.
we're
But
never done, right?
yeah,
I did make it
correct.
sound a little bit like a race.
Definitely more of a marathon.
Yeah, absolutely. More of a marathon, that's right. But you do find more and more people, which is why you do the work that you do today and the work that I do today. And clearly, the purpose for both of us was to have lived the lives that we lived, go on our healing journey, and now pay that forward to others, really shining our light to help others to do whatever it is that they need to do to move to a better place in their life as well.
Yeah, 100%. And that is also part of our healing journey, that ability to give back, if you like, pay it forward, to share what we've learned with others and help them find their own path. So yeah, I find that really supports my own well-being these days.
Yeah, finding the purpose there. So you touched a little bit on some of the things that you were experiencing that led you to your healing journey. But if we could for just a moment back up maybe a step or two. And as I say to all of my guests, we talk about healing on this show. That's very much what we're focused on, and we'll talk more about that as we continue. But setting the stage for why we needed to heal. Um, so if you would share a little bit about that, but whatever you're comfortable with, that would be really wonderful.
Yeah, very comfortable to share. I say I find it quite cathartic to share
Mm.
the story as well. Yeah, so it all went back to around about 2018. So we're around 6 years ago now. And there was a whole series of things that happened. We had a big restructuring going on at the work. And it was like a global restructuring driven from the global center, which was not in Asia, and very ambitious project scheduled to last several years. And new reporting lines, new services from new service centers, everybody will have new bosses, and there would be redundancies at some point. So very stressful and not particularly well planned or mapped out, actually, feeling our way through. So, yeah, and I was in the middle. I was trying to lead the project on behalf of the global firm, but also lead my people locally in the region. So I felt a bit stuck in the middle. Couldn't really please everybody. So that was stressful. And then one of my stress relievers is water sports. So I'd go on my canoe and I just love being on the water, paddling with my friends. And we had a massive typhoon called Typhoon Mangkhut. And that completely smashed all our water sports equipment. So what had been my stress reliever became a source of stress because everybody was so upset and we couldn't get new canoes. It took months to get them new canoes delivered and together. So that didn't help. And around about the same time, we had social unrest here in Hong Kong. So I'm actually grew up in Belfast, so there were a lot more violent social unrest there than we ever really had here, but still slightly disconcerting. My wife's health got really bad. She has chronic asthma, so there was tear gas in the streets here, and that obviously would have triggered her asthma, been straight to the hospital. And at the same time, around about the same time, shortly after, we got COVID, and my wife's doctor said, oh, if you get COVID, you're probably going to die. So I thought, wow, dude, you could work on your bedside manner. But, and then the next thing that happened was then we bought a very expensive flat. So Hong Kong's a very expensive place to buy property. And we fell in love with a flat that was a bit bigger than we'd budgeted. It cost a bit more. And so that was a lot of stress around, okay, how am I going to top up my pension pot? And my partner was saying, oh, 5 more years of your bonus, it'll be fine. I was thinking at this stage, Jesus, I'm not sure I can do 5 more weeks. And then my boss got promoted to be the global chair, and I got a new boss, and he came up from a different part of the region, didn't know him so well. So then I was in this horrible dilemma of, do I go to the office, try and build a relationship with this new boss that's potentially put my wife's life at risk because we didn't have the vaccine at that point for COVID. So it was a pretty impossible place to be. So that's how confluence of all of those factors that resulted in me just being so stressed I couldn't sleep, and running to the loo several times a day, and just feeling out of control. I couldn't concentrate, couldn't focus. Decision making really bad. I'd get really irritable and shout and yell at people, type totally ungrammatical, misspelled emails, which I would never normally do. So just a whole lot of classic symptoms of burnout, really.
Yeah, all coming to a head, and then you have to do something about that. It's interesting that all that you're referring to, and this comes up a lot on the show. We talk about the physical aspects of what gets us to a point of needing to heal, and that's manifesting the survivorship in our bodies. So the body keeping score. I'm sure you know about that book called The Body Keeps Score, which is a wonderful book about that, right? How we hold it inside of us, and what you're describing is the manifestation of that, and your body saying enough.
So that's how the healing journey started. Actually, I went to my family doctor. I can't sleep, and my tummy is the way it is. So she said, "Yeah, okay, we can give you some sleeping pills or something, do some investigations, find out what's going on." But she was obviously very perceptive, and I guess I was just looking so exhausted and so stressed. She also, at the end of the consultation, said, "But Brian, do you feel you'd benefit from seeing a psychiatrist?" And I nearly cried with relief, actually, because I felt in my heart I knew that was what I needed, but I'd been denying it and trying to ignore it because I'd never had an experience like that before. So uncharted territory. So so my doctor got me in touch with a psychiatrist, and I got prescribed medication, and I got prescribed talk therapy, and so that was how the healing journey started.
Yes. So when was that? That was about
that would have been 2019, late 2019. So it's a thing with burnout. Extended period of time exposed to chronic stress that exceeds your ability to cope. So I had probably about 18 months of being in that situation.
And that chronic stress, that's the environment we come from, right? The past environment, a lot of years in that environment as well. And it does take a toll on us. after some time. In fact, it's funny. I'm one of the things I'm really working on now, because it was just June of last year that I left that world completely to do what I'm doing now. And one of the things that I find myself wrestling with is I'm really trying to cap the number of hours that I work in a week. That phrase, old habits die hard, and just I can just put in more hours and more hours. And I think it's almost, well, for me, it's almost been like a subconscious thing, which I think it is for all of us in that environment that we were in previously, where we've just done it for so long. We're so conditioned that it's nothing to work a 10 or a 12-hour day. And it's not like you plan it, but it just happens. We just do it. It's in our nature, right? And I'm in that place now where I'm really trying to not do that anymore and to work much less than that. In fact, even spiritually, I've had like the universe speaking to me. I've been getting a number of messages starting in November of last year with this idea of slow down, take a nap, right? I keep getting that. It's like these reminders that I don't need to work that way anymore. So, right, because I don't want to burn out in what I'm doing now. That's fun and I have a lot of passion about it, but old habits die hard.
Oh, 100%. I would find myself just like sitting at my home office desk all day, even if I had nothing really productive to do, just because I felt like I have to be here, like I have to
Mm,
be at my desk trying to be productive, even if I was just like looking out the window. You know?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
And yeah, so taking, and I could just go out and go paddle on my canoe or, go for a walk or meet someone for lunch. But you're right, you just don't, you just so out of the habit of doing that,
yeah,
that having time for yourself, obviously this happened, I eventually quit my job because it was just not working out for a number of reasons. And so I had the time, but yeah, just taking the time for yourself and being kind to yourself and just slowing down and enjoying life. it's, yeah, it's really you get out of the habit of enjoying life, right? It's
you
just so
do. I
hard
mean, yeah, you do.
that you do.
Yeah, that's what I tell people. I wore the work mask is how I refer to it. And that I think also, well, I don't think, I know for me, that was an easy and rewarding, beneficial way to distract myself from what I really needed to be dealing with. And when I talk about rewarding and beneficial, it's because there was a decent amount of financial upside with that kind of work that we were doing. You're killing yourself, but you're getting and putting money's going into your pocket. And I'm not definitely not advocating for that because I don't know if that's really balanced and for any of our good and for our well-being. But for me, certainly it was a way to distract me from everything that had happened in my life that I had experienced, both the trauma, the abuse, but also the way that I had been suffering in my own unhealthy survivorship for so many years at that point in time. So it's like a self-perpetuating wheel that we get on.
It is. I mean, you're right. I was a lawyer at the beginning of my career, and even back then in the 1990s, everybody knew the deal, right? You're going to sell your soul. You're going to work like crazy. You're not going to have a social life, but the pay will be great. And maybe you'll do some cool deals that will feature in the Financial Times, which even as a baby lawyer, I did. So you get
Yeah,
hooked on that. You get hooked on the adrenaline. You get hooked on the
you
money.
do.
You get hooked on the status you feel that gives you. And the deal was always be exhausted by you get to 50, 55. And so I had always, my deal was I would retire at 55, which is actually pretty much the age I was when I quit my job. And my mum very kindly reminded me when I was in the depths that, Brian, you always said you were going to retire at 55. And I was going, so I did. And here I am. But yeah, was that a good deal to make? I don't know. Yeah, but so
I
many
don't know.
people
I
make
mean,
that
I
deal,
don't
right?
know.
Mm.
So many people do. And I don't know if it is, I don't know if it is or not. There's so much that you miss out on, so much loss that I just, we're going to come around to that, right? It's the work that you do now, trying to get a little more balance on that ever elusive, one of the phrases in my experience professionally that I least like was work-life balance because that was never my experience. Right? There was no life balance when with that kind of work, right? It was heavily weighted toward the work side. So it's one of my least favorite phrases. So you talked to your medical doctor, which is also how my healing journey, I forgot about that. It both started, the point for us both started with our medical doctors. Yours sent you in one direction, and mine had me take another step before I got to where you got to with the talk therapy and all of that type of thing with my trauma therapist. So tell me what else like your healing journey, going down the path of the therapy and medication for you, and then you've mentioned now a couple of times that you ultimately left that job that was creating a lot of that stress for you. Just some of the other things that you have done on your healing journey and even do now in terms of maintaining your overall emotional health and well-being. What are some of those things that you do?
For sure, yeah. I always had a very healthy regime, a healthy lifestyle. I do my exercise. I've been doing yoga for many years. I always get outside at lunchtime, eat my sandwich in the park, try and get a consistent bedtime, wake up time, eat healthy, binge drink on work occasions when you have no choice, but generally not too much drinking. Certainly not having glasses of wine every night, although maybe for a few spells of time. So generally pretty fit and healthy. But what I found with the insomnia was, so my training is early in the morning. We get up early, we get out on the water, we do our paddling. And when you've only been able to get back to sleep at maybe 5 a.m., like you don't want to get up at 5:30 to go do your sport. So I found my exercise regime had gone out the window. And then I wasn't seeing friends because I was just working longer and longer hours, being less and less productive, and not feeling like I wanted to see anybody because I was just grumpy and irritable and probably not fun to be around anyway. So yeah, so the healing journey was just trying to address some of those issues, trying to get better sleep, which took a very long time, and I still struggle with that a bit. Consciously trying to see friends, so meet up with somebody for lunch, have a lunch date with my partner once a week. I say getting back into the exercise, getting outdoors, doing the yoga more regularly. I got into meditation practice. And then I would do some kind of career things. So I used to do some sketching when I was younger, and I just got my actually sketched on the iPad. Just got the Apple Pencil and sketched on the iPad, and then just courses. So using your brain to learn stuff. Tried learning Cantonese, which is quite a challenge at any age. I didn't get very far, but at least it was a process of using a different part of the brain. So I think there was all of that, and just trying to relax and get a little bit more rest. So the thing with the burnout in particular is your cortisol levels are at such a high level that you cannot really relax. So I'd say the first 6 to 12 months were really just trying to stabilize the nervous system, just trying to relax, trying to chill out a little bit. And yeah, the connecting mind and body, reconnecting mind and body through the yoga and the meditations is really helpful for me.
Yeah.
Just using a little bit of movement because you live so much in your head, catastrophizing and worrying and all the anxiety, worrying about the future and all of that. Or dwelling on the past and ruminating on stuff that happened and how unfair it was or yada. So just going in with the body and trying to get a sense of more groundedness was really helpful. And insight meditation that I practice is about getting in touch with what are these crazy thoughts and what's behind them, what am I really believing, and how are they showing up in the body. So quite a somatic practice of noticing where am I going to get my tummy, my neck, my shoulders, is there any cold contraction or whatever. So yeah, so connecting in that way, I find really, really helpful and part of my healing journey.
Yeah. So I have a question about the yoga in particular, and I'm just going to take this one as an example of my question. You probably know where I'm going with this because you said you did yoga for a long time, was kind of in you. So if you think about like the differences between your yoga practices, let's just have the demarcation be the day you went to your doctor. Your yoga practice before you went to see your medical doctor, and clearly you must have been doing that during a time when you were feeling the buildup of that stress and the anxiety. And then you still are using the yoga and the meditation practices now after seeing on your healing journey. So I'm just curious about the compare and contrast of what was happening, because everybody thinks about yoga as everybody can see it in the post, I went to see my doctor to get some help, but you were already using it as a tool before, but you're still having challenges and growing challenge. So have you thought about that? And can you talk about what was happening throughout that?
Totally. So I said that like the definition of burnout is a prolonged period of stress that exceeds your ability to cope. So I had all these coping mechanisms, of which yoga was one, but the stress exceeded my body's ability to cope. So it didn't matter how much yoga I did, I would never be able to relax because total cortisol overload, totally flooded with stress hormones. So yeah, that's the depressing thing about burnout is that that is the physical way that it works. It affects the body and then affects the mind. And unfortunately, it takes 12 to 18 months or even 2 years for some people for that actually to settle. So you can actually like regulate yourself in a normal way. But yeah, when I think about my yoga practice before, I guess it was more, using it as like a stretching practice. And I would go to like a big yoga studio and there'd be all lots of very flexible, fit and bendy, typically quite young Asian people. So
Yes.
there's like a competitive element and quite high,
Oh,
like quite fast paced, quite demanding style of yoga. Whereas after the style of yoga, I'm not a yoga teacher, by the way. Yeah, because I had the time and I've always wanted to be able to do that. And so the style of yoga morphed more into a much softer, more gentle, and much more holistic. So a bit more
yeah.
breath work, a lot more relaxation pose, a bit of meditation would come in, maybe a bit of chanting. So not about the actual poses, nothing Instagrammable about the way that I practice yoga these days.
Which I think is
So
wonderful.
yeah, yeah, it's a very
Yeah,
different
it's a
way
good
of
thing.
practicing
Yeah.
it. So it's using the body and the breath to take control of the mind. That's the way I was taught. But yeah, after style of yoga, that's what I learned that yoga was
Yeah.
really about.
Yeah.
Whereas before, it was like a fitness thing and a stretching thing. Just,
What I call the commercial yoga. I know exactly what you're talking about.
commercial yoga. You
Lots
know
of that.
exactly which
So
studio I'm talking about.
yeah, I do. I actually, when I was there, I actually did Pilates with a woman who was she was a former ballet dancer. I don't know, her name's Ruth Hogg. I don't know if you've run across her or not, but if Ruth,
Yeah,
but she was wonderful. And that was really much more about mind, body, and soul. Right? And she was very good about helping you make
yeah.
sure you had the poses and the exercises, your body was in the right position, but it was definitely not, as you say, there was nothing Instagrammable about my poses. Not the commercial type of yoga, which Hong Kong has a lot of. That's a great explanation of that. So thank you. And I think the one thing that you said in the beginning of that is that there was no amount of any kind of yoga that you could have done because the stress level was so high. And that's back to the work pressure that we were talking about
Yeah.
previously and just trying to, as we do, trying to achieve in that environment. Although for a lot of us, that drive to achieve is just ingrained in us, which is not great. I think it's one of the things from a self-discovery standpoint that I talk about in the healing journey, the evolving part of understanding who you are, that you realize sometimes you're your own worst enemy, right? You're
Yeah.
compounding your own suffering, right? Effectively, you're abusing yourself. It's what I call the wretched abuser, because that's effectively what we're
Yeah.
doing is causing self-abuse, right? And it's just
Yeah.
unfortunately for some of us, we're wired that way and we have to break that. Yeah.
No, 100%. I see my healing journey had two main phases. One was that just settling the cortisol, getting myself back to a
Hmm.
more regulated way of being in the world. And then the second part, and this is driven and supported a bit more by the insight meditation practice, and I do that practice in dialogue with a few groups of people we'll get onto later. But that was where I've really been able to address like what just happened there, what was my conditioning, what was like the sort of inner child work, like all the way back to when I was a youngster, what were the kind of
Mm.
messages that I picked up that I was then like living out, really responding to, trying to be safe in the world, but in a way that was not really helping and that was actually probably contributing to where I ended up. So that has been a much deeper kind of healing process. I think I'm still that's where the journey goes on
Yeah,
forever, probably. But
it does. And it's
I
interesting.
think steady progress, right? You can't rush this stuff. It takes time. It takes the time that it takes.
It does. And
So
it's
yeah, definitely
interesting that,
two phases to the healing journey. Just sort of
yeah,
healing the body and the mind enough to be able to go deeper.
yeah. And it's interesting that and that's exactly what my experience has been. I feel like I wonder because I stayed in that environment, right? I stayed in it until June of last year when FTI company I was with separated me, which just timing, it just needed to happen for me to go on my merry way and do what I'm actually supposed to be doing in this world. But I really wonder what my experience would have been. Because, of course, in Hong Kong in COVID, there was a lot that we were not doing because we were on such severe lockdown, right? During a lot of what you were going through and then what I was going through. But I wonder, I feel like that gave and you can, I don't know how you feel about this, we've never talked about this before, but I feel like just thinking about it now, it was like a break from that pressure because there was a period of time when things stopped and we were all trying to figure out how are we going to get going again, right? And in particular, the professions that we're in and the work that we did, there was a court aspect of that where literally these global cases that we worked on, the global matters we worked on, the court shut down all over the world. And it took a while to figure out, in my case, government agencies shut down. And how are we going to continue to actually? So I feel like that was a little bit of a break period. And so I wonder, in my case, had I not had that break period, if I would have eventually come to the place where you were, where I just would have been like, I gotta get out of here, right? Which is ultimately what you did, right? The choice that you made was to just step away to really get the break.
Yeah. Yeah, no, exactly. I didn't live through, because I quit before that sort of break period that you're talking about. It was in the anxious period of, oh my God, shutdowns, lockdowns, nobody knows what the hell's going on, travel restrictions, how do we stay in business? So I maximum stress. So
Yeah.
So I quit before that sort of period where we could, okay, we've got the vaccine, we know what we're doing, we can get through this somehow, stuff is going to change for sure. Yeah, so I was just at home resting at that point. I didn't actually have the break. The break by quitting work.
Yeah. We're working on the
energy
cortisol at that point, huh?
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
So, yeah. So would you share a little bit about that second phase of your healing journey and just explore that a little bit for us?
Yeah. So I mentioned that I'd always wanted to do my teacher training for the yoga, and I did do that. And that was a beautiful experience. So we practiced a style of yoga called integral yoga. It was a guy called Satchidananda. And he was the kind of, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn how to surf, was one of his taglines in an advert in the 1970s, I think. And I think he was at Woodstock and stuff like that. He was the guy with the long white beard at Woodstock.
Oh, okay.
But anyway, so it's a very holistic way of practicing yoga. So you do the breath work, you do the meditation, you do the movements, you do the relaxation, etc. So you do the chanting. So it's using all these different elements to help you regulate and connect mind, body, and soul. So finding that sense of inner peace, so peaceful body, peaceful mind, is what we're trying to achieve with that particular style of yoga. And so that was one part of it. So that in itself was very supportive, and it's a very healing environment. Our teacher was very close to the guru, so real strong kind of lineage influence there. So just created this beautiful space with a group of a dozen, I was the only guy, a dozen women. Very healing space for all of us. Like we all came with some story, like not exactly like mine, but some healing that we had to do. And so I got really quite into the whole meditation part of it as well, sort of in parallel, I guess. And I'm just graduating actually this weekend from a 2-year meditation program, which has been quite a deep and rich experience as well. That's insight meditation. So trying to see, just kind of let thoughts be the thoughts and not get caught up in them, kind of let the emotions be the emotions, kind of explore them and try to feel from where they're coming and so on. And then I also got into this insight dialogue group. So insight dialogue is a way of practicing meditation with a partner. It's very much exploring the physical experience of how these emotions or thoughts affecting me physically. And you take turns and you just articulate your inner experience, and your partner's just offering that presence and support, and then you swap, do the same thing. So I find that helps you go really deep into what am I actually feeling and experiencing here. And the fact that you're able to articulate it without any kind of judgment, they're not going to comment, they're not going to summarize, they're not going to ask questions. So you're just totally free to express whatever's coming up. And also when you're the listener, you're just listening. So you don't have to do anything clever. You're just there to listen and observe. So listening to your partner, but also noticing how they're sharing is affecting you. So a very, very deep interpersonal connection. So that was where you're exploring a lot of the conditioning, exploring, okay, what am I believing in this situation? Why am I being triggered by a particular situation? And that kind of takes you all the way back to a lot of that sort of inner child stuff that I mentioned. What was it when I was a little kid? I was the first grandchild from my maternal grandparents. And the message I remember, one of the messages I got very strongly from them was little children should be seen but not heard. So Yeah, so I always had a trouble finding my voice until more recently. I always felt like I didn't have the right to be heard, or my voice was not welcome in the room. So I would just kind of like mumble and mutter and trail off at the end of sentences and stuff like that. I had voice coaches over the years, but like they never managed to make any real difference. So that's an example of the sort of thing that I find the meditation can help you to really get a better handle on. How does that show up? So for me, it'll be like there's something caught in the throat or some tightness, something there. But the core belief is that nobody's interested in what I've got to say. I'm not somehow not of interest to the world. So that's a big healing journey. If you can feel like, yeah, I have a value, I have a voice, and it is meaningful, I've got something worth saying.
Which absolutely do, and all of us do. And I'm so happy that you found your voice. So have I. So that finding my voice is part of my journey as well. But what I want to ask you about that is particularly going back to the professional environment, and really as you were growing from being a young lawyer to a senior executive, along the way, if you look at that, were you getting feedback from like a performance evaluation standpoint that now you can see went back to this idea of finding your voice, and so you can see where not really using your voice at work? I mean, did that show up professionally?
Oh, 100%. Like every time. And it was the most annoying part of every evaluation. Oh, Brian, you mumble, you don't speak clearly.
So I actually love that
Yes,
you're
but I
touching
can't.
on this,
Like
because
the hardest thing for me to, I
yeah,
didn't know
and
how
you
to
don't
work
know
on it. I
why,
didn't
right?
know what the problem was.
Right, you have no idea. And then you have an amazing opportunity to go on a healing journey, discover what the problem was, put it all together, deal with it, and now going on to help people with that. I think about this a lot because I've sat in so many, and I have to think about it myself. I don't know that I ever heard those words directed at me specifically, but I think so many times of people being told they didn't have executive presence, right? You get to become a manager, and in every firm around the world, there's an assumption that if you make it past a senior associate level or manager level, you're going to go on to be a partner, whether the person wants to be a partner or not. But that's the assumption, right? That's the path everybody is on. And so you get that there's always that constant feedback, assuming you're moving in that direction to become an executive and executive presence. And I've thought about that so much. And in fact, I think what you're describing is probably very common for people who get that kind of feedback. But the training for people to be able, managers and leaders to be able to recognize that there's potentially something like that in play, we are so far away from having leaders who have any idea that's a potential issue that would need to be dealt with, right? And I've discovered some of those things myself, but that's exactly what you're describing. Is there's a reason why
So
you
the
would
key
get
word,
back.
yeah, I mean, the key word there is presence, right? Executive presence. So one, there's a very gendered thing about that. Women will much more often be told they are lacking
Yes.
executive presence because of all the systemic bias in the system. So
Yes.
the office I used to call that out. What do you mean she lacks executive presence? What exactly does that mean? Tell me.
Yeah.
But the other part of it that I've come to learn, understand, and see much more clearly is that presence is actually the only thing that matters for a leader. Like if you cannot be fully present for other people, you cannot connect with them. If you can't connect with them, how can you lead them?
I
Right?
love
You're not
that.
going to lead them. You can boss them, you can shout at them, you can make them scared, but you're not going to be a leader. So that ability to be present for primarily actually for your own emotional experience. The boss from hell is the one that is so out of touch and they just rant, rave, get cross, get triggered, get angry, blame other people, etc. That's because their own needs are not being met and their own emotional experience is not being understood. It's being suppressed in some way, and they're acting out in the way that they do because of that. So that's sort of mindful, I call it mindful leadership, but it is all about being present enough for your own emotional experience so that when you do get triggered, you know that's my stuff and not my direct report stuff, because they're going to feel, oh shit, I've really messed up because the boss is angry, they must be angry with me, but the boss is expressing anger because they've been triggered in some way, because they feel inadequate or they feel anxious that their bigger boss is going to be cross with them. So it's not the pro direct report, but the pro direct report feels that it is. So that is not executive presence. Right? That is just a total lack of presence. So yeah, so I think you're right. That is a skill that we all have, but somehow we get it beaten out of us because of all the stress and all the pressure. For not be kind and human and connect deeply with your people around you, and then performance, of course, will blossom and thrive. But so yeah, I think we beat that out of people in the corporate culture and in most companies these days. And, so yeah, so it goes much deeper than how you show up in terms of giving presentations or engaging in meetings. Much, much deeper.
Yeah, absolutely it does. And I think it's important. And of course, we're going to come around to, that's a good segue. We're getting into the work that you do now. So we'll talk about that more and helping leaders to recognize those things. But I also think for the employee, like the person who is receiving the feedback, I don't think that, because I can remember getting critical feedback throughout my career, we all receive it and we respond in different ways. I can tell you without a doubt that never once did I go, oh, what happened to me back in my childhood that might cause me to be doing this, right? But the reality is exactly what I'm talking about, right? I mean, each one of us have had so many experiences in our life, and many of those experiences have not been good. We're conditioned because of the traumas, because of the abuses that we have gone through. We just put them inside of us and we become the person who we become as a survivor, but we don't ever connect that when I'm the employee receiving that feedback, maybe that's a sign, I would say, maybe an early sign from God that there might be something you want to explore, right? I mean, why is it particularly, and everybody gets feedback from somebody who doesn't like you or doesn't really have their pulse on the reality of what's happening. Those things always happen to us. That's common. But if you get feedback that is relatively consistent and from different people over some period of time, that might merit some self-exploration about what is it that's causing that, right? And because it's not a bad thing and it's something you can heal from. You can deal with it. You can move past it. So it's a good thing.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, totally. So a couple of my triggers. One would be if I feel like I'm being disrespected in some way, not taken seriously or taken advantage of. I'm a very kind of giving kind of person, and if I feel people are taking advantage of it, it's for me quite a big trigger.
There's some irony in the number of hours you were working every day and giving to the firm, right? Taking
Right?
advantage of you.
Exactly.
I get what you're saying.
Always giving, never receiving is how it feels. Yeah. And another one for me is being excluded. So if there's some sort of little cliques or some meetings happening on the side, like big trigger for me. And that goes back to like school playgrounds. During, I guess, what your American audience would call recess, there'd be two teams. We always play soccer because that was the only game we had back then. The captains would pick one. I'd be the last kid not to get picked. So that sort of being excluded, for me, it's a big trigger. I always felt that was a very hurtful experience being the last kid that nobody wanted on their team because I was so useless at soccer. So that sort of in my mind became like a huge, big programming, a huge, big trigger. So if it was anything like I wasn't invited to or stuff that I wasn't in on, like I had to know everything about everything that was going on. So for me, that was killing me because like I was being copied on so many emails I probably didn't need to be. I'm going to so many meetings I probably didn't need to be. And it was multiplying my workload like crazy, just because of my own insecurity about not being included. So that for me was one huge kind of learning and a part of the healing journey. That's okay. I can be okay with myself. I don't need the approval of whatever other people. If people who want to pick me, then great. That's their call. I don't have to get hurt by that.
Yeah. Those discoveries, linking those back to your childhood, did they come through that insight dialogue work?
Yeah, I think so. Just not necessarily always inside dialogue on that one, but yeah, just the deep reflection, meditative practice over time. I guess you're on that journey, you're exploring the stuff, and I find that reflection is kind of helpful. I don't do a lot of journaling. Journaling's another thing that I have done. Sometimes that can be helpful just to write down some of the things that are coming up, and then you can come back to them later. So it's an evolving process. So it's no kind of one thing that kind of helps you to understand this stuff. It's just
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just sitting with it, just being curious about it, just allowing it with a degree of self-compassion. This is another thing I think we get beaten out of ourselves, is any kind of self-compassion. Those are so important to any healing journey. It's okay, what happened is not my fault. Like, my grandparents did what they did, my parents did what they did, my teachers did what they did, my bosses did what they did, my friends did what they did. It's not, none of it is your fault, but figuring out how it is that you respond to it and how it is that can trigger you, that's where your responsibility is. Okay, all of that stuff happened, but how am I relating to it? And, that's where your accountability and your responsibility is. So I think you can bring it, when you see it that way, you can bring a degree of compassion. So, okay, stuff happened, that's not my fault. I reacted to it because I was just trying to make myself safe or feel okay in some way, or I was just suppressing it and denying it because that also made it hurt less. So so if you can bring that compassion to, okay, where is the hurt and what does the hurt need? What sort of nurturing do I need? Like just putting a hand on the chest or on the belly, or maybe so that sort of offering yourself that sort of kindness. I think it's so important in the healing journey. And we all have this inner critic that's, come on, should, better, you're not good enough, all of that. And particularly, bosses are also telling you you're not good enough. That's the whole point of an annual evaluation. The boss feels, I've got to tell this person the ways in which they're not good enough.
Yes.
So how the system
Your inner
works.
critic just gets going louder.
Yeah, so
the inner critic is actually
like
the one I call
oil
the
on the
abuser.
fire for the inner critic. So just knowing the inner critic is there and just talking it, and thinking, inner critic, you go do what you want to do. I don't actually have to take that seriously, and I can just offer myself this sort of love, compassion, kindness, and be okay with the way things are right now. That for me has been so helpful.
Yeah, me too. And I say that the person that I have the most grace for and acceptance of is me.
That's so hard to do, right? That's been a long practice.
Long journey.
Working on it.
I'm right there with you, Brian. 100%. It is a long journey to get there. It is. Yeah, but once you get there, it's a good place to be. And I do think you're right about once you start getting on that get going on the self-reflection and that self-discovery, where you may have tools and resources that facilitate that in the beginning, like the inside dialogue you were talking about, that sort of teaches you how to do that, how to express and listen.
Exactly.
But then what you find is you have that inside of you, and you can express to yourself and listen to yourself,
100%.
right? Which is that continuing to self-reflect on what's happening whenever you have a particular reaction to something. I think
that's a great way of putting it. Yes, and I guess part of the journey has been learning these tools, and how does yoga affect my body, affect my mind, and then similarly with the meditation, it is a bunch of tools or techniques or practices, ways of being, that you piece them all together, and then you make them what you need. You pick the tool you need for whatever way you're feeling.
That's exactly right. So, it's that holistic approach to healing yourself and then managing whatever comes in the future, because it will, right? We're humans. You're going to continue to have experiences that are painful. And so you just hope that you're more resilient. You can use the tools better and more quickly. Yeah.
So you said healing yourself. So I'd like to talk a bit more about that, because I don't think it's a journey you can do on your own.
I agree. I agree. 100%.
And so one of the things I did quite early, so I dropped the kind of whole legal and leadership thing, and I wanted to help other people that were maybe going through something similar. And part of that, just give back, was just to set up some peer support groups, so mental health peer support groups. A friend and I decided we wanted to offer that. And so we got a bunch of people together. It was during COVID, so it was always been online. And it's just a peer sharing whatever is going on for them. We had people with bipolar, we had people with major depression, we had people with alexithymia, just long-term low mood or totally out of touch with their emotions, anxiety, depression, like a whole range of different kind of mental health challenges. But just creating a space where there was no judgment, and there was just support and empathy, and your voice is welcome. Everybody gets heard if they want to share. That was for me. So even though I was facilitating, I still found that extremely helpful, because I would also be there as a peer. So I'd be sharing and receiving as well as facilitating. So I think that's, we started the conversation there with that connection that you and I made about this experience, even though our experiences are probably very different, but like the challenges that felt the same. The healing journey had to start in a similar way. just knowing that is going on all over the place with so many different people. It's that knowing is so important. Having a space where you can
Powerful.
explore your own experience and find other people who've got similar experiences. This is how they dealt with it. This is what they learned. This is what helped for them. Without fixing each other, don't give advice. Just share. This is what I did. And this is what I learned. Like we're doing here. That's a connection that you feel. That kind of, oh, maybe I'm okay or okay enough because other people are experiencing this. Therefore, it's okay. So it's important, I think.
It is. I completely agree. And one of the most, still today, I've experienced some really amazing occurrences as I've traveled through my healing journey, what I call universe touches, where literally the hand of God is coming down and touching me with some profound thing that has happened. One of the very first things that occurred for me was finding Talk Hong Kong, which I'm hoping you've probably seen more about it now, all the great work that Tara's been doing recently and actually making it a 501c3 or nonprofit. I call it a 501. It's a nonprofit. I don't think there's not an US IRS code in Hong Kong. So whatever the equivalent nonprofit is in Hong Kong, it's that type of an organization now. But when I discovered that, she had only just started the group as a support group. And the amazing thing about that is that it was an English speaking support group for female femme survivors of sexual abuse. And there was somebody who was focused on the child sexual abuse, which is Tara. And then there's another woman who's the co-founder who was focused on being an adult and experiencing that. But for me, like it was like one of the first, the day that I found my trauma therapist was the same day that I found Talk Hong Kong. But finding in Hong Kong, of all places, I was like, there's going to be nothing here to help me. I'm in Hong Kong. Yes, English is a predominant language, but this is still very much, we are in China, right? I was like, there's going to be nothing here to help me on. And I was blown away by finding Tara, who's an American, who had begun Talk Hong Kong about a year before, and she's slowly getting it up and going, right? But you're just what you're saying is so true. But when you are in a room with other people who you connect with, because the very, very difficult experiences that you've had in your life, you've experienced the same thing someone else has experienced. It's a different type of connection. It's a different rapport. It is a different way of understanding one another. And it's a different level of acceptance that you get from those people that you're sharing with. And it was pivotal for me in being able to move forward in healing. And I agree with you completely. Finding a group of people who are like you with whatever those challenges are that you have is definitely high on my list of recommendations for people, which it is for you too, clearly.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And we started our group because somebody said, will you start a group? Because I can't find one.
That's what
in
she
Hong
did.
Kong.
Exactly. She started the group she couldn't find a year before. And I'm like, well, you started it for me because here I come. So yeah, exactly. Which I also think that's a good thing. People who are on their healing journey, if you can't find the resource you need, start it. The book I wrote. I say that to people, I couldn't find the book I was looking for about forgiveness. And so I wrote a book that's my story about how I came to forgive the people in my life who hurt me. It's not really what it's about, but that's why I wrote the book, right? So it's the same thing. You start a support group because you need to find people who are like you so that you can share in that experience for your overall collective growth. So yeah, I agree. It's hugely important. So tell me a little bit about the work you're doing now.
Yeah, so there's two streams. One is still doing work in the corporate space, talking about resilience, talking about burnout, sharing some of the practices. So quite often these days do some chair yoga, do some breath work, do some meditation with people, and they can feel it, right? You can explain this stuff to people who can intellectually get it. There's a nervous system, you need to be able to regulate it. Intellectually, we can understand it. And of course, lawyers in particular love that intellectualization part.
Yeah.
But when you actually experience it, it just has a totally different impact. Like literally, you could hear a pin drop at the end of the discussions, and people just don't even want to come back from the meditation. And they go, "Oh, this is just nice. This is so nice."
Yeah.
So a little bit of that, and it might be about belonging or inclusion, or how do I support my colleagues? How do I spot the signs? And how do I listen deeply to another person? Workshops around that space, creating more thriving and supportive cultures in the workplace, as mindful leadership style I mentioned. And then beyond that, I have a men's community called MoveMen. And I've done a lot of gender equity work I've alluded to in passing over the years. I've been focused on the women's experience and how do we change systems and processes and cultures to improve the outcomes. But then we have the kind of Me Too backlash, and we have the manosphere, and we have the insults, involuntary celibate young men, kind of angry and frustrated and feeling a bit hopeless.
Yeah.
I was thinking, these guys are not making this stuff up, but largely they are just being told they still have so much, you're a man, therefore you have so much privilege, therefore shut up and get with the program. Not very helpful. They just get sucked into their manosphere and they can be angry and frustrated and do stupid stuff. So I felt maybe I need to pay a bit more attention to the guys and create a space, a community where guys can just support each other in a more sort of social and emotional and even spiritual way than we typically do. So gender conditioning we have is that it's okay for women to talk about their feelings and emotions, and you have your girlfriends, that's kind of what you do.
Yeah.
Whereas guys don't. We talk about sport or cars or money or women in a very toxic way, but we don't talk about how we're actually doing.
Yeah.
We don't ask for help. So I wanted to create a space where men could come together. And I don't talk about mental health. I don't talk about toxic masculinity because I don't feel I need to. I just say it's a space where men support each other through life's ups and downs. So even men will acknowledge they have ups and downs, right?
Yes.
Know that.
It's a good first step.
Yeah. So then it's like I create a space in a very similar way that I would in the peer support groups. So confidentiality, mutual respect, non-judgment, not advising, speak from your own experience, share the time, share your wisdom, but no compulsion, no pressure to do that. And then we use a little bit of movement. So I feel like guys in particular are so disconnected from our body. The movement just helps us to be a little more connected, a little more grounded physically. And also for men, I think it helps release a little bit of the tension, a little bit of who's the alpha top dog here, where do I sit in the pecking order, and this kind of stuff that guys do when they're guys they don't know that well.
Yeah.
And then we'll do a little bit of meditation just to bring it down. It's like slow down, pause, relax, see what's really here. And when you do that, stuff comes up that you weren't aware of before, you mentioned earlier. And then we will do this dialogue practice in the way that I described, just to go much more deeply. And at the same time, they're making a very deep connection with at least one other individual. And then we'll have some circle time and share what we all learned. And we cover topics like relational difficulties or career challenges or anger management, or we did one recently on body image. So what's your conditioning around sexy or ripped or strong or whatever you need to feel. So yeah, and a whole lot of topics they're very much present for men, but we don't ever really talk about how we feel about those topics. So that's been great. We've been going over 18 months. We've got 115 guys, I think, in the community.
That's amazing.
So we do the work together,
I'm so happy to
guys
hear
meet
that.
offline. They help each other with their career issues or their personal relational issues. And we got into a little part of our ritual now is taking selfies of each other when we happen to meet at different locations. So it's really creating that sense of, oh, we're all in this together. Yeah, life sucks sometimes. We're all feeling it, and we can explore it, we can express it, we can articulate it, we can put words to it, and it's all okay. One of the loveliest bits of feedback I got from one of the guys was, Brian makes you feel like it might all just be okay. Again, yes.
That is, yes, because it will be. That is
That's
great.
The job.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the focus on men because I talk about this a lot, that we're all human beings. Males and females are human beings, which means we're all emotional beings, but somehow men got left out of the you can be an emotional being part. That just got, I don't know, the world over. It seems to have been swept under the rug, right? And there's definitely a different expectation there, which I think is very unfair. And so I'm really inspired by the work that men are doing. And it's one of the reasons why I really am, it's important to me that I have men on this show, because it's important for other men to see that and to see men who have been through what you've been through. You're a human being, right? So you've had a human experience as a human being, and that's okay, right? And so it's important to see that. But the work you're doing is equally important to to help guys to do the work that they need to do as well, right? Because there's
Because
nothing
we all
like,
have that hurt little 6, 7, 8 year
yeah,
old kid who's not
100%.
being picked for the soccer
100%.
team. The little kid is
Yes.
still in there, right?
Yes.
And that little kid is probably also very kind, very compassionate, very loving. But in the corporate space, that gets bashed out of you. Right? That is not how
Yeah.
you succeed in your career, by being like
Yeah.
compassionate. Right? You got to be a badass.
Not even in the corporate space though, right? There's so much competition in
Right.
most everything that men do, right? It's
So it's okay to express anger and frustration as men, particularly in the US culture. Violence is so prevalent, and it's generally male violence.
a whole nother show,
You
Brian.
mentioned you mentioned Tara and your group, and like violence against women is a huge part of male conditioning, like their frustration, their anger, that I'm not man enough unless I've got the power, I've got the control, I've got the dominance, and all of that stuff. And it just manifests in so many harmful ways for the individual and for society. Polarization, violence in general, it's mostly male driven by the male conditioning, and this not okay in the social context to be in touch with your emotions as a guy. So yeah, so that's what we're doing. So it's like healing at a community level, or for me, it's like bringing more love and peace into the world by having the guys feel okay in their own skin. Like I can be okay.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Even if I have all these crazy emotions that maybe I don't even understand, I can't even name them. I'm not sure even where I feel them, but I know there's something going on. So can I just explore it and be with it and be okay with it? Yeah, and the guys just feel, okay, I can chill a bit, right? I can just back off and let it be. And then they're better partners, they're better colleagues, they're better lovers, they're just better parents. All of that follows.
It's the main reason why we need to heal. It comes down to relationships, how we interact with the people in our lives. It's the driving reason. I talk about it in the context of love, but love across a number of different relationships, all the relationships that we have. And that is the reason to do it. And we all have some work to do. So newsflash for everybody listening. We all have work to do. If you think you don't, you do. I still do. You still do, right? It's just always going to be healing, always going to be improving. So yeah, it's just where we are. I am really happy to hear about the new work because that's amazing. And your focus on men is very inspiring to me. Spot on. So congratulations to you for doing that. And I'm grateful your journey has led you to this place because it's definitely needed.
Yeah, exactly. It's yes, exactly. It's like the universe for me has brought all these things together.
And I just had global visions of you taking this program globally.
Yeah, it's called MoveMen because like I want it to be a movement.
I love it. I love it. So I will keep watching for sure.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on the show. It's been delightful to catch up with you again. Good to see you. I think we might talk again at some point.
For sure. I'd love to. Thanks so much.
Yes. All right, everyone. That is a wrap for today's episode of Let's Heal. And come on, everybody, do your healing work. Thank you for watching today's episode of Let's Heal with Beth Jones. If you've enjoyed the content, please subscribe to my YouTube channel at Beth Jones Healing Mentor. The Let's Heal show is also available on all major podcast platforms. And if you'd like to know more about me and the work that I do to serve other survivors of trauma and abuse who are healing, please visit me on the web at empoweredsurvivors.com.